Good evening. I'm Katie Conboy. I'm president of St. Mary's College, and I am so pleased to welcome you to our first Sexual Violence Symposium, Raise Your Voice, and to our inaugural speaker, author Chanel Miller. This event is sponsored by the President's Committee on Sexual Violence, and I'd like to give a special thanks to the Christine Anderson Trustee Wellness Program for supporting tonight's program. And I also want to acknowledge Liz Coulston-Bauman, our Director of Student Involvement and Advocacy, for her extraordinary efforts and hard work to plan tonight and the entire symposium. Let's give Liz a round of applause. You may already know this statistic, but every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. That means that in every room we are in, there are survivors of rape and sexual assault. The Me Too movement, started by Tarana Burke, made sexual violence more visible in this country. And so did author Chanel Miller by writing her powerful letter to the court at the sentencing of her attacker in 2016, and through her book, Know My Name. Chanel Miller wrote a memoir, but she also wrote a polemic against rape culture, against the ways survivors are blamed and shamed by their peers, by the media, and by American society. We are taught assault is likely to occur, Miller writes, but also that if you dressed modestly, you'd lower the chances of it being you. Miller's book points to the double standards and double binds in a violent culture. She wrote her story to bring solidarity and aid to others. And this is a quote from her: whether you're a man, transgender, gender nonconforming, however you choose to identify and exist in this world, if your life has been touched by sexual violence, I seek to protect you. From the moment the Stanford University campus newspaper reported an arrest, Chanel Miller was unnamed. Know My Name reverses the way she was assigned no name, no identity, no character traits. And that all happened in the high-profile 2015 Stanford rape case. The news coverage reduced her and her entire identity to one word: victim. But Chanel Miller is so much more complex than that. She's a multifaceted person, a biracial artist, a writer, a Californian, a comedian, a warrior. The late great poet Audre Lorde said, "It is better to speak." And Chanel Miller speaks her truth and her pain in this very necessary book, detailing the testimony, the jury selection, the cross-sentencing, and the trial of her attacker. Her story is a harrowing step-by-step account of the aftermath she endured after sexual assault, from the moment she woke up at the hospital to 5 years after the assault, when she meets the Swedish bicyclists who had helped her. Hers is a story of loss and also courage, of resilience and healing. During one crucial moment, Miller writes, "It feels better when the story is outside myself." Our first Sexual Violence Symposium at St. Mary's College is committed to highlighting voices and stories that belong front and center, outside ourselves. Please join me in welcoming Chanel Miller to St. Mary's.
Hello, everybody. Can you see? Okay, I'm gonna assume you can hear me. And I'm going to begin with a short reading from my book, Know My Name. And this section is going to be toward the end. I am not sure exactly what healing is or looks like, what form it comes in, what it should feel like. I do know that when I was 4, I could not lift a gallon of milk, could not believe how heavy it was, that white sloshing boulder. I'd pull up a wooden chair to stand over the counter, pouring the milk with 2 shaking arms, wetting the cereal, spilling. Looking back, I don't remember the day I lifted it with ease. All I know is that now I do it without thinking, can do it one-handed on the phone in a rush. I believe the same rules apply, that one day I'll be able to tell this story without it shaking my foundation. Each time will not require an entire production, a spilling, a sweating forehead, a mess to clean up, sopping paper towels. It will just be a part of my life, every day lighter to lift. Ram Dass said, allow that you are at this moment not in the wrong place in your life. Consider the possibility that there have been no errors in the game. Just consider it. Consider that there is not an error, and everything that's come down on your plate is the way it is, and here we are. I don't believe it was my fate to be raped, but I do believe that here we are is all we have. For a long time, it was too painful to be here. My mind preferred to be dissociated. I used to believe the goal was forgetting. It took me a long time to learn. Healing is not about advancing. It is about returning repeatedly to forage something. Writing this book allowed me to go back to that place. I learned to stay in the hurt, to resist leaving. If I got stuck inside scenes in the courtroom, I would glance down at Mogu, my dog, and wonder, if I'm really in the past, how did this blinking thing get in my house? I assembled and reassembled letters in ways that would describe what I'd seen and felt. As I revisited that landscape, I grew more in control, could come and go when I needed to, until one day I found there was nothing left to gather. The transcripts that once overwhelmed me were now only pieces of paper. I began to belong more to my present than my past. I was no longer trying to get somewhere, only asking myself, are you improving? Sometimes the answer was not today. Sometimes I was regressing, but the voice in my head was now gentler. Whatever the answer, I was patient and understanding. From grief, confidence has grown, remembering what I've endured. From anger stemmed purpose. To tuck them away would mean to neglect the most valuable tools this experience has given me. If you're wondering if I've forgiven him, I can only say hate is a heavy thing to carry, takes up too much space inside the self. It's true that I'll never stop hoping that he learns. If we don't learn, what is life for? If I have forgiven him, it's not because I'm holy. It's because I need to clear space inside myself where hard feelings can be put to rest. Many of us struggle to crawl out from under what we've been given, to build ourselves beyond the small definitions we've been assigned. I feared at times that I'd lost my imagination because I felt boxed in my role as victim. But when I was trapped, I learned I could still move internally. When I felt depressed, I wrote and imagined my future down to the coffee bean, the children's books I will illustrate, the chickens I will have in my yard, the soft cotton linens, the sauce-dipped wooden spoons on the counter. The need for it to come true, according to plan, was not important. The act of imagining was. I wrote this book because the world can be harsh and terrible and often unforgiving. I wrote because there were times I did not feel like living. I wrote because the court system is slow as a snail, and victims are forced to spend so much time fighting rather than spending their days creating, drawing, cooking. I wrote to expose the brutality of entitlement, gender violence, and class privilege in our society. But I would be failing you if you walked away from this book untouched by humanity without seeing what I saw. Those thousands of handwritten letters, the green-lipped fish at the bottom of the ocean, the winking court reporter, all the small miracles that sustained me. We may spend half our time wandering around, wondering what we're even doing here, why it's worth the effort. But living is an incredible thing, just to have been here, to have felt, if only briefly, the volume and depth of others' empathy. I wrote, most of all, to tell you I have seen how good the world could be. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, everyone virtually and in person. Thank you to Chanel for your time. My name is Sophia Sanchez. I am a current senior here at St. Mary's, majoring in gender and women's studies. Just again, thank you for everyone. Thank you to the audience.
And I'm Jamie Wagman. I'm chair and associate professor of gender and women's studies and history. And I'm so grateful to be here with you, Chanel Miller, and with all of you tonight and online.
And with that, we'll go ahead and start with our interview. Chanel, what would you say was your first initial step to healing?
I would say that it was asking for help, because I am an older sibling, the older sister, and I had just graduated. And so independence was at the forefront of my mind. And I was priding myself on being self-sufficient and beginning my life. And I really did believe that when the assault occurred, that I could take care of it on my own. And it wasn't until a few weeks before I had to testify for the first time in the preliminary hearing did I realize that my body would not physically allow me to walk into the courtroom. I couldn't imagine my legs like taking me to a place where I didn't want to go. And so then I turned to Google and just Googled sexual assault therapists near me, found the nearest one, walked to her office and said, you have, 3 weeks to prepare me to be able to do this. But even when she helped me with some visual techniques so that I could enter that room, help me visualize people, women who I love kind of standing behind me, placing their arm on me while I testified. But when I was actually testifying, I didn't let anyone into the room. Like, I didn't let my parents come watch me because I thought it would hurt them too much. And I knew I needed to be really open about all of the pain. And so in order to protect them, I kept them far away as possible. After that time, I knew it was going to be too difficult to do on my own. I knew I needed reinforcements. So I started to let people in. But it was so important for me to realize, like, the people who love you, like, want to be inside the pain with you. Like, that's what it's all about. That's what our relationships are about. It's not just about having a good time together. And they saw it not as a burden, like me coming to them like, hey, you need to fix this problem for me. They saw it as an honor to occupy that really stormy space and be planted in those really uncomfortable seats in the courtroom. And so my advice for healing would just be to let people in sooner, because the people who love you want to help you. They want to bear that weight alongside you. And this is never the kind of thing you're meant to do alone. Like, this is a communal problem. And just because it happened to your individual body and your body was the vessel for the violence doesn't mean you're meant to take care of it on your own. So, yeah, just reach outward.
Thank you. Chanel, your work and labor in writing Know My Name helped you heal. How would you suggest we at St. Mary's go about helping our own students with their healing?
I would definitely say turn to writing because, yeah, I majored in literature, and my whole college experience was like a string of endless book clubs and just talking about how we felt about what we read. And so when my victim advocate told me that there's something called a victim impact statement, and all you have to do is write down your thoughts and feelings, I thought, I have a degree in this. Like, I'm so very ready to indulge this assignment. I also think writing is just not even towards something or for anyone. It's a practice in listening to yourself. And I know that in my day-to-day life, I'm pretty accommodating, pretty quiet, not assertive naturally. But when I'm sitting with my thoughts on the page, all of the rage can trickle out, all of the honesty of how things really do impact me start to make themselves known. And so writing is not just like what I majored in, it's my way of deepening the relationship with myself and training myself to hear what I have to say.
Thank you. Where did you find the strength to make it through the trial and the many years after?
Do you all hear that siren? I'm in New York City, so there's high drama. To be honest, it wasn't so much bravery at the time as it was being naive, because I didn't know so much of what would happen. And I went in with this like total blind trust in the system, like, oh, I was hurt and the authorities are going to help me. And then by the time things started getting sour and I realized that honesty wasn't centered in the courtroom, but I was already in too far to turn back around. And so at that time, I don't know if it was courage, it was just necessity. I will say that what did help me was the fact that my sister was there. She was there the night of the assault, unfortunately, which meant she had to testify in the trial. And so I felt extremely afraid of the defense attorney. I hated being in that room. I hated the feeling of eyes on me. I think if I might have thrown in the towel earlier, but when I saw how my sister was being hurt in this process, like that fear dissipated like almost instantly and just turned to this clear-headed rage, like intentional rage, where all of a sudden I was like, I need to go back into that room and I need to express how you cannot do this. And this amount of hurt, this relentlessness of it is absolutely not okay. And it was one thing to come after me, but it was another thing to come after her. It was another thing to never even acknowledge the existence of my family while we were sitting there. So that part did embolden me. I think it's always easier to fight for your loved ones than it is to fight for yourself.
Thank you. Chanel, what advice would you give survivors when they come across moments of their past experience but want to move forward? In other words, how can survivors best acknowledge what happened to them but also not relive their experiences?
I think at some point you will relive them, but what you have to know is that it's possible to relive them without getting lost in them if you're surrounded by the right people and resources, right? So it's possible to venture, to be safe in the present, and then venture back in your mind. I think it's incredible. I've told the story so many times, and in the book, there's something's really bad is happening outside. It's okay. We're all fine. I hope they're okay. I told the story so many times, right? I tell it when I'm in the hospital, at the police station, first testimony, second testimony. And so when I sat down with my editor, one issue we had was like, how do we tackle this book without making it so repetitive? And you only have to state the facts of what happened one time. And then each time you revisit that story, the interesting thing is that you're the one changing, right? The story never changes, but you evolve with it. And even if I'm relaying the same facts, the way I did it, my body posturing changed, the way I was able to breathe changed. Like I went from completely my mind going black, like when I would tell this story and breaking down, not being able to breathe, to now I can do it in front of a room I cannot see and be sipping my tea, and it's really okay. And so I think it's okay to be afraid of the story, but I want you to notice, if you dare to return to that story, I promise that each time you return to the story, there's going to be shifts in your relationship to it, in the way you're able to tell it. And I really encourage you to take note and notice those gradual changes in you, because it's really exciting.
How do you handle a tension between telling your story as a sexual violence survivor and not wanting it to define who you are?
I was really, really worried about this at the beginning, right? Because I was like, oh, I'm too young. I haven't had time to make anything else out of my life, and nothing big enough to transcend this story. But then I realized people, like my parents, never saw me as just the victim. Like it didn't even, I remember my dad, after reading the book, he's like, I had no idea. He had no idea that I had bought into the idea that I was also just a victim, because to him, like, my image in his eyes never wavered, right? It was never like reduced. It wasn't simplified. Like I was always this fully embodied, multifaceted person. And so it's incredible to be out on the other side, on the surface, getting to speak to people and understand that, like, even if it's the center of our talk today, I'm not worried that anybody won't be able to fully acknowledge me as me, like I'm here. My head is ginormous on the screen. You can see my dimples. You can see I like different nail polish. I got lots of books. Like there's so much going on. And when I was able to kind of step away from my trauma, I also just felt like, oh, he had no chance of trapping me in a label that small. Just no chance. Like your life is too big. It's gone. And even if you're young, like you have entire chapters of memories that happened way before this, that have formed you in some way, and it's so rich. And I understand why, like, how you can forget that, but it's always there. And like, again, the people who love you know that, like, they can't be tricked.
Thank you. Chanel, your 12-page victim impact statement explaining the severe impact your assault had on you went viral very quickly. In June 2016, when the statement was published, more than 18 million people read it. Why do you think it resonated with just so many people?
Sorry, do the last part again.
Why do you think it resonated with so many people?
Oh, is that even, you're really shy about it, you want it to be good. But after the trial, dang, I was in so much pain that I didn't even have time to be self-conscious, right? It was it was just like, I have one chance to communicate. And even though I testified for multiple hours, you realize you're never speaking from you. You're only allowed to answer directly to the question that's being asked of you. And even then, you can still be interrupted by objections. So it was such a stifling way of speaking. So to finally have an opportunity to say what I felt, like, of course, I was going to take that opportunity. And yeah, again, by that time it was just all pain, and I was so fed up with it, and I wasn't embarrassed by it, because by that time I realized, I was like, this pain doesn't make me crazy. Like, it's been intentionally generated in this space, and so much of it has been so unnecessary. And so I guess it was powerful because I just wasn't worried about how it would land anymore. Like, it was like, felt like the last thing I could say, my like last breath in this suffocating space. And it was in a strange way, like, I write well when I'm hurting, because all of the other stuff that normally consumes you, like self-doubt, there's just no space for it.
People are interested in your book writing process, and specifically how you wrote about healing in a way that resonates with so many survivors. How did you write about your healing process as you were still healing?
It was really difficult. I asked myself the same question. I was like, how the heck? It felt ridiculous. It felt ridiculous because I wanted the book to not just like leave you devastated, but I was in bad shape when when I was reading through all the court transcripts. You have to realize too that the trial was 2.5 weeks long, and I was only allowed in there when I testified and also for the closing statements, but I didn't get to see anything else. And so I learned about it in these papers. I burned some of the papers, to be honest. I was so mad. And I cried and cried and cried. And I guess what I wish you could see is that there was just whole chunks of solid time where I didn't do any writing. And those chunks were just as necessary as the days where I did sit down at my desk and string sentences together. Because when you're trying to, like, I think of it as like your mind does half the work and your body does the other half. And so days when I wasn't writing, I'd say it's okay because my body is working through something. Like, I can't operate at this level of anger Like it has to wait a couple days before you can get it to like a simmer, and then maybe you can start to form sentences. But I would just encourage anyone to reconsider what they think of as work, and really acknowledge that processing is part of the work.
Thank you. Chanel, what drove you to start the book? What happened that made you think, I need to put this into words?
Well, what's strange is that there were, without my choice, right? There was narratives about this story from the very beginning. And I always had to read the news. And whenever I read like the victim cried or something, it just felt so surface level, and it didn't align with the like oceans of sadness I was feeling. And I really couldn't live with that like disalignment. And you also have to take note that 18 people testified during my trial. And so that's 18 different points of view. I was considered the least qualified one because I didn't have memory of that evening. And for a long time, for the first year, I really did believe I didn't have anything to offer. I felt so bad that there were people working so hard and taking time to show up in court, and then I show up and I have nothing. But I knew that in my life that the story didn't stop. It didn't stop when the case closed. It didn't stop when we exited. Like I was living through it every day. And I just realized like that's the story. You can read the facts on Wikipedia, you can get the transcripts online, but I was the one who held that story that's true to me. And for every survivor, like you have that too. It's this untouchable part of you. It doesn't matter how many opinions, evaluations, perspectives there are of what happened, because your story is yours alone. That's your truth. And that's what I wanted to get on the page and seal.
Thank you. When was your moment that you knew you were going to write your story? Was there ever a, if not, then who moment for you throughout your journey?
Yeah, definitely. It was so disturbing how much I was told that it was rare to have these cases go through. Like, I remember asking when the detective showed up at the hospital that morning, I said, like, how many calls like this do you get? And he's like, well, there's a number of assaults that get reported to the school, and then an even smaller percentage that get reported to police, and even smaller percentage that the DA will actually take and move forward with. And so from day one, like within the first 24 hours, I knew I was in this sliver of a percentage. And luck isn't the right word, but I did feel that there was value to being there, and that it was just so rare to even be given the opportunity to move forward. I just couldn't stray the path. So I did feel like I had to do it. And then I'll also say I'm very grateful that I came to peace with the fact that I would do it imperfectly. Like I tried so hard to appear composed in court. Like I didn't dye my hair and I didn't wear colored nail polish. I was trying to be good, whatever that meant. And in the book, all I wanted to show is like I am a mess. Like growing up is so complicated and confusing. And there's been so many nights where I haven't had it together, but that's totally fine because it's all a part of being human. And I wanted to show that there's a difference between being human and making mistakes and committing a crime. So I hope that was made clear in the book.
It was, thank you. So often victims of sexual assault are sidelined and silenced, made into objects rather than subjects of their own stories. Can you talk about the act of placing yourself at the center of the story and the power of reframing a narrative?
Yeah, it was one of the most fun challenges of the book is like, okay, I have this story. You already know what happened, right? Like people knew what happened in the news, but those were the big headlines. And then I got to sift through my life and look for my headlines, like what days were important to me, what moments like shifted something in me. And you have your own milestones and headlines. You have the big days where everyone thinks like that was the day your heart was broken or everything fell apart. But when you really look back at your life, it's really interesting to identify those pivots and impactful moments that are usually in really quiet moments or uneventful moments in your life. So it was fun writing about figuring out what those things were for me and getting to include them in the book. I think like my sister and I are driving to the courtroom and we noticed that there was a cat, one of those really hairy caterpillars on the windshield, like clinging on for dear life. And we need to get there on time, but I love that we pulled over and like got a receipt out from the center console and took the time to lower this caterpillar into the grass, right? Like that's not going to be in the news, but that story was important to telling you how my sister and I move through the world and how we care for things and how caring for this little caterpillar is more important than the humans who are about to rip us apart in suits in the courtroom. So getting to include those moments and find them again in my memory made me realize again, like the story is so expansive. Like there were so many things happening around just those like hard, difficult parts. And they're really fun to find.
Thank you. Throughout the book, you talk about the many names you were given during the investigation and the trial, and your own personal use of names, and the power of claiming your name. For all those years, people knew you as Emily Doe. What's it like seeing your name in bold letters on the cover of the book? Why did you feel it was important that people know your name?
So, funny story. When I signed the book contract in 2016, I said, yes, I promise to give you at least 90,000 words, but I do not promise to come forward at the end. And so I finished the book in like April 2019, and they were like, you have to make a decision now. And so even when they were doing mock-ups for the book jacket, they still had Emily Doe on it. Like it was so last minute that I decided to finally come forward. And I think it's wonderful to be able to use my name because, again, like I really, really never, ever thought that this could be a point of pride ever. And I remember thinking during the trial that I just needed to get through it. And then one day when my non-existent future kids turn 18, I'll sit them down, be like, Mom had something happen to her. You can find it if you search really deeply on Google. That was my plan. And then like the statement came out and people were so supportive, and I realized I knew more than I thought I did, and started to see myself in a different light and be proud of what I had lived through, and felt that I was ready. I had my literary education. And so by the time I was done, like I even remember one of my good friends, she just said, like, I would hate for people to not acknowledge your writing. Like, she was so excited. We were in school together. Like, this is such a wonderful thing. And so I hope that it's also saying, like, it's not just, hey, I'm Chanel Miller and I was assaulted. It's like, hey, I'm Chanel Miller and I'm still here, like, even though all that stuff happened. And that's really exciting.
Chanel, is there any particular message you hope your audience carries with them after reading your story?
Well, especially for the youth, for the students, honor your point of view and, like, just know that that your experience carries so much value, because at the time that everything was happening, I didn't feel like I had much solid ground to walk on. Like, I just didn't have any credentials. But I didn't need them because I had my observations and I was paying attention and I was open to feeling and documenting. And all of that has been so valuable. I got the book deal when I had just turned 24. And that also seems like an odd age to write a memoir. Like, you're supposed to be seasoned. But especially now, like, young people have gone through so much and it's so dense and intense and ongoing. And I hope you just learn to take your experiences seriously and know that you don't have to wait for your English degree. You don't have to wait to turn a certain age to be able to, confront these topics.
Time for one more question. You always wanted to be a writer, majoring in English in college. You shared in 60 Minutes that this is not the topic you would have chosen to write about, but it was the topic you were given. Do you plan on writing any additional books?
Yes. And okay, I'm gonna write a couple for middle schoolers. I'll probably do a few picture books, probably do some more nonfiction essays. I will say, I mean, writing is so lonely, but oh gosh, but having now been on the surface, being able to talk to people again, I think I'll be able to go back into that writing cave and do that. But yeah, totally. I will always be writing.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much, Chanel.
Thanks. Thank you, St. Mary's.
Hi, Chanel.
Hi.
My name is Liz Colston Bauman, and I am the Director of Student Involvement and Advocacy here at St. Mary's College. Thank you for those of you that have texted in questions. If you still want to try to get a question into Chanel, the number is printed on your program, so feel free to text those in and I'll do my best to navigate that. But I do have a few to get us started. So from the audience, following you on social media, I see that you are a strong advocate on a variety of issues. What advice do you have for navigating activism and making change?
Ooh, again, paying attention to your own timeline, not just the news timeline, because this will be important to me forever. It can't not be, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be at the forefront of this fight forever. And I think, like, even when my impact statement went viral, I was getting all these calls and these news people were like, hey, we'll fly you into New York. We'll blur your face. We'll contort your voice so you can still remain anonymous. I was like, I don't think I'm ready to do that. And they said, okay, well, try and make a decision. I said, well, I'll need more time. They're like, well, we would need to do it in the next 2 weeks. And it was like, that's the news cycle. Like, you'll be relevant for 2 more weeks and then your opportunity is gone. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous because I can't be ready that fast. So I just let all those opportunities go. And I sat down in the quiet by myself, writing this book for a couple of years. And then you have the Me Too movement happening. Like it's like, oh, you could launch this now and it'd be good for sales. None of that mattered. All that mattered is that keeping that little antenna up in me. Like, how are you feeling about this? Do you feel like, oh, it's time to really step into the spotlight? Or do you feel like people are dragging you out into it? And I was waiting for that shift to happen. And so I finished in the spring of 2019 and pub date, fall of 2019, good to go. And it didn't rely on any other timelines except my own. And so now still there's news all the time. We know this. And at first I tried to keep up and I tried to respond each time something happened. Harvey Weinstein goes to prison. Like, what do you have to say? Okay, I'm hopping off a flight, but I'll process that in 20 minutes for you. So, but now I just think like, oh, do I just want to feel this for a couple of weeks? Do I need to write about it on my own to even understand how I'm feeling about it? Like, I know it's okay to step back. I know it doesn't mean I don't care. And so I would just encourage you as an activist to also take that time to let things marinate and listen for when you're ready to speak. Because when you do, it'll be ready. It'll be powerful.
Thank you. That's really good advice. Next, as someone who is thinking about becoming a forensic nurse, what did you remember about the nurses that was helpful or not helpful in your situation?
Great question. My nurses were the best people ever, I swear. So even when you go get the rape kit done, the forensic exam, they confiscate all of your clothing and your undergarments. So all you have is a hospital gown. And thankfully, there's a nonprofit called Grateful Garments that donated all of these like fresh sweatpants and sweaters. And so I was given this like whole tracksuit, which was so nice. And these things are like, it's crazy that they were not a given, but that someone who had likely gone through that process recognized that there was a hole in the system and actively filled it. Like, that's so amazing. And that sweater, most people might think like, oh, why would you want that? It's like a memory of the worst morning. But to me, it's like, it's my treasure. Like, I love that sweater that I got from the hospital because it's a reminder that in your darkest times, there are people who are really rooting for you and who want you to walk out of there, you know? And my nurses, they were so, you know, like when a kid falls and they kind of look at you like, am I okay or not okay? And if you're exuding calm, they kind of can absorb that too. My nurses were they were almost like casual and not in a way that dismissed the gravity of what was happening, but just like, hey, do you want another cup of oatmeal? Or if I was taking pine needles like out of my hair, I was like, do you want these? They're like, oh, you can leave them there. You know, like this is dark stuff, but like it's like, I just felt like they could handle it. Like their capacity was so big. Nothing I did was going to scare them away. It wasn't going to disgust them. It wasn't going to freak them out. Like they were just holding that space. And then I remember my sister came and picked me up, and there's 3 of them, and we did like this group hug, and they just held me and then released me, and I never saw them again. But it was, damn, at the time it was like that was the beginning of the journey, you know? And they're like, we can't follow you. Well, they did because they had to testify in trial, but I didn't get to see. But them saying, this is the first leg. And And they were setting the tone of like, you deserve to be comfortable. None of this is too much to handle, and we're here to help you. And thank goodness they planted that in me, because I would forget a lot of that when things were getting difficult, but I always had that feeling to go back to.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a great forensic nurse team here in town, and some of them are here tonight. So I'm grateful to hear that your experience was good too.
Oh, great. Thank you.
All right, this next question comes from a member of our class of 2019. Your book fundamentally changed how I view forgiveness for my experience with domestic violence. However, I still struggle treading the line of feeling forgiveness and anger for my abuser. I'm wondering how you can tightrope this line of forgiveness and harboring righteous anger in a healthy way.
Great question. I have plenty of anger. Plenty. And like, I think I have so much. I actually made a comic on my Instagram about how it's almost like I have this faucet in me, like a little tap, and I can open it and some red liquid comes out and I just sip it every day, like just a little bit, a moderate amount, just to keep running through me. And it's good because again, it's an alert that I care. And even anger for you means that you care about yourself. And that's so cool. Like for a long time, I was just depressed, just flattened and really lethargic. And when that anger started to kick in, like that was a good sign. Like in the book, I say that's your signal that you're starting to step onto your own side. You know something's being violated and you're not okay with it. And that's great. And it's okay to follow that. And so, yeah, again, just letting it work through you. Like I wrote really inappropriate things with a really big marker in my notebooks. And I did that. I didn't publish them. I don't have to read them. Okay. But I did that for me. and it got me to the place where I could write what I did. And so not judging that, just like letting it run its course through you and then keeping it with you indefinitely. Like I think it's good. Like it's our fuel. We should be mad. This is so maddening, of course.
What advice do you have for aspiring artists and writers?
Just keep writing and arting. And again, there's no one's ever gonna like touch a little wand to your head and be like, now you're ready. Do things even when you don't feel ready is what I would say. Because you figure it out in the process. Like even writing the book, I'd never obviously written anything that long, but my system was that my editor would call every Friday at 11 a.m. and check in on me. And about every 2 weeks, I would have a deadline. And so I never thought of it as like, I have to sit down and write this book. It was like, I have to work on 3 different scenes and submit them within the next 2 weeks. And that's how just stringing along those fragments is how we got to the end. So just show up in any way that you can, spit out a few scenes, let you get to the next part, but don't be daunted by like, oh, I have to unpack all of this and over 300 pages. It's like, it was always working in these small little Google Docs.
So we have a few men in the audience here today, and a few of them have texted in asking what their role can be. Often they feel out of place in these realms, and what can their role be as an ally and a supporter of survivors?
You are exactly in the right place. There's nowhere else more important than here tonight. So thank you for that question. I think what's amazing about my case is like, there's my assailant, which is an example of everything you should not do. But you also have the Swedes in my case, and it's very rare to have examples of positive role models in these situations. And so, number one, they saw what was happening and decided to investigate it. Two, like, there are two of them. One went after him, the other one stayed with me to make sure that I was breathing. So the fact that they took me in first and then went after him, then they stuck around, and when they were telling the police it happened, were crying, like didn't shy away or say like this is too complex or upsetting to deal with, but just again, we're just going through it. Like nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what it would lead to, what would happen. And they just stuck through it. And then one of them later told me that his bicycle was like technically part of this crime scene. So it got confiscated. So he had to walk to school for like months. I felt so bad. But he still, like, he's like, okay, I'm going to walk to school now. And then they showed up to testify again and again, which they didn't have to do. And with them, it's not even like stopping my assailant alone changed my life, right? There's only a story because of them, only because. But they kept showing up. And I think that's something to note too, is just consistency. Like being present consistently, even when you don't know what to do, like even if you've never testified before or don't know how to manage this case that's happening alongside your studies, like the fact that they just kept figuring it out. I knew, even though I couldn't meet them, that they were alongside me. And I needed to know that. And you can signal that to a survivor just by showing up imperfectly, just by saying, I don't know what I'm doing, but I will try my best. And you can definitely count on me being here.
One more question for the road. I feel we know so many intimate things about you, but I want to know, what do you do for fun?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. It's true. I've had people come up to me in New York, be like, how's your dog? I was like, what's your name? But it's really nice. It's always really nice. What do I do for fun? Great. What do I do for fun? Well, I draw. I'm a big time doodler, and that's really amazing. I go on long walks in New York City. I love New York. It gives me like 1,000 things to notice in a day. So I like making what I call diary comics about my day. I don't know. Fun is like a hard word in the last 2 years. I don't know how often that word is like utilized. It's more just like, what do you do for relief? Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I know you just did a doodle of your day. I think it was today. So if you guys don't follow Chanel on social media, you definitely should. Thank you, Chanel, so much for joining us tonight. We are so appreciative to all of you. Let's give her one more round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks everyone at St. Mary's, in person, online. Thank you for the really moving intro. It was really lovely to spend, it's only Monday, to spend this Monday with you, but I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Professor Jamie Wagman and to our student Sophia Sanchez for their interview earlier. I hope you all join us for our last event of Raise Your Voice, which is our Take Back the Night event this Wednesday starting at 5. And thank you so much to everyone for being here tonight. I hope you take advantage of reading our survivor stories from our campus community in the What Were You Wearing exhibit, and please grab a cookie and visit our resource tables on your way out. Thank you.